When my house burned down, my son let out a short, nervous laugh, more from disbelief than relief. He stood on the curb with his arms loose at his sides, watching the flames climb through the windows, and a short laugh slipped out of him like relief. Someone finally getting what they deserved. My daughter-in-law stepped closer to him, her voice steady and certain. Someone remarked on the irony, joking lightly about past troubles. I took all of it in without moving. The fire roared behind me. Their words landed harder. The story you are about to hear is a work of fiction created by the Her Chains channel team, based on real-life situations to convey lessons about family, emotions, and human values. All characters and events are illustrative. My name is Marrow Ellison. I had woken to the smell first, then the sound, not the crackle, but the alarm. Shrill and panicked. By the time I reached the hallway, the heat had already pushed me back. I grabbed nothing, not my purse, not my phone, and stepped outside in an old nightshirt. The cold bit at my bare feet. Neighbors gathered. Someone wrapped a blanket around my shoulders. I remember thinking how quiet I felt, as if my body had decided to leave before my mind caught up. When my son's car pulled up, I expected urgency, a question, anything human. Instead, he looked at the house, then at me, and smiled like the universe had finally agreed with him. My daughter-in-law nodded, as if this settled an old argument. They talked about lessons, about patterns, about how some people never change. They filmed the trucks. They whispered to each other, amused, while everything I owned collapsed into itself. No one asked where I would sleep. No one offered a coat. Someone joked that this was what happens when you turn your back on family. I watched the phone in my son's hand, the way he angled it to catch the flames just right. I memorized that sound. The fire mixed with their voices, and felt something in me go flat and quiet. I did not argue. I did not plead. I turned away from the curb, walked past the neighbors, and kept going until the noise faded. By the time the fire burned itself down, I was already gone, carrying nothing but the knowledge that this had not been an accident of fate. It was something they had been waiting to see. The story traveled faster than the smoke ever did. I learned it when Mrs. Calder from 2 houses down stopped returning my nods, and when the man who used to bring my mail, if it landed in his box, set it on the curb instead, careful not to step onto my porch. No one announced a change. It simply happened. My son handled the telling. I heard it through other mouths first, at the grocery store. A woman from church leaned close and murmured, "He's been through so much." She paused, then added, "Your boy mentioned the fire was complicated." Her eyes slid away before I could respond. Later that week, my daughter-in-law made it cleaner. She called, voice warm, almost instructional. "We're just being honest," she explained. "People relate better when there's a lesson." She spoke as if she were packaging a product. If you ignore patterns long enough, consequences show up. That's all we're saying. I told her I didn't ask to be a lesson. She sighed. "Patient. Don't take it personally. It helps people make sense of things. Sense of my house burning, of the laughter on the curb." My son chimed in through texts that read like captions. It wasn't random. There were signs. "You always did things your own way." Each line shifted the ground under my feet, turning loss into evidence. When I pushed back, gently, he replied, "You're too close to see it." Authority crept into his tone, as if he were older now, as if I were a case study. Neighbors repeated it without meaning harm. "Some folks carry trouble with them," one woman whispered while returning a borrowed pan. Another offered advice I didn't ask for. "Maybe this is a reset," she suggested. Lips tight with relief that it wasn't her. I noticed invitations dry up. The phone stayed quiet. Even sympathy felt conditional, measured against a verdict already reached. I had become the explanation people use to keep their own lives orderly. At a family gathering I wasn't invited to, my daughter-in-law raised a glass and spoke about resilience. Someone recorded it. The clip reached me anyway. "Hard truths make us stronger," she declared. My son nodded beside her. Solemn. Supportive. The comments filled with praise. I closed the video and felt myself thinning, as if parts of me were being edited out, not erased loudly, just removed from the frame. I keep circling back to him, not the man on the curb, but the boy before that, the one who used to sit at my kitchen table, swinging his legs, asking me to check his math twice. I remember the first time I covered his rent when the promotion fell through. He promised it was temporary. "Parents forgive and forget," he replied. When he was 30, after the fire, he brought me a stack of papers. "It's just until things stabilize," he told me. Tapping the folder, I stayed up late sorting through numbers, calling offices, smoothing edges. He went to sleep relieved. I went to work the next morning, like nothing had happened. That pattern held for years. After the fire, I tried to talk to him once. I kept my voice even. "I needed you that night," not an accusation, a fact. He answered with a laugh that wasn't unkind, just dismissive. "You always land on your feet. You're strong like that." Strength, to him, had become a reason to withdraw care. He added, "You chose your life. I chose mine," as if choice erased responsibility. I reminded him of the loans I'd forgiven, the weekends I'd driven across town to help him move again, the nights I'd listened while he complained about being misunderstood. He waved it off. "Parents do that," he replied. "You don't keep score." I told him I never had. Not until now. His tone shifted, sharpened by certainty. "You act like I owe you," he pressed. "I don't." The words came out clean, practiced. No pause, no hesitation. He'd rehearsed this version of himself where gratitude was optional and memory was selective. I felt the grief then, heavy and exact, not for the house, but for the space between who I thought he was and who he'd decided to be. Love hadn't vanished. It had been repurposed into leverage, then set aside when it became inconvenient. When the call ended, I stared at the blank screen and understood something I hadn't before. I had raised a man who believed support was an inheritance he could claim without acknowledgement, and somewhere along the way, my care had taught him that it would never run out. If I traced the lines of our family back far enough, they all led to my desk. It started small. A form my son didn't understand, a deadline my daughter-in-law overlooked. "You're good with this stuff," she told me once, sliding her laptop across the table. Not a request, an assumption. I fixed the numbers, adjusted the language, sent it back clean and quiet. The next time, there were more tabs open, more urgency, less courtesy. When bills piled up, my son dropped a grocery bag of envelopes on my counter. "Just make sure nothing gets shut off," he muttered, already reaching for his keys. I organized the mess, set reminders, negotiated extensions. He texted later with a thumbs up emoji and nothing else. Gratitude had been replaced by relief. My daughter-in-law preferred distance. She emailed contracts late at night with notes like, "Can you skim this or just flag anything bad?" When I asked what the timeline was, she answered, "Yesterday, I stayed up, reading fine print, catching penalties, reshaping budgets so they wouldn't collapse." The next morning, she posted about manifesting abundance. No one asked whether I had time or energy. The work arrived the way gravity does, constant, unquestioned. After the fire, the requests didn't stop. Quick question. My son wrote, attaching a document. "This won't take long." My daughter-in-law added in another thread. I stared at the screen and felt the weight of it all press down at once. Not the tasks themselves, but the way my presence had been reduced to function. That night, I opened a blank notebook. I wrote the date at the top. Then I listed what I'd done that week. Phone calls, corrections, deadlines met because I remembered them. It wasn't anger that moved my pen. It was fatigue, a need to see the truth laid out where it couldn't be minimized. The pages filled quickly. Years condensed into ink. Patterns I'd ignored became undeniable. The woman they called cursed had been holding the structure upright, quietly absorbing strain so others could move freely. I closed the notebook and felt something shift inside me. Validation didn't bring comfort. It brought clarity. And with it, a steady awareness that nothing in their lives was as effortless as they believed. It had only appeared that way because I never let them see the work. The jokes arrived like aftershocks. Small at first, then regular enough to bruise. My son forwarded a clip from a late-night show about home disasters with a laughing emoji. Too soon, he typed. When I didn't answer, my daughter-in-law chimed in. Humor helps people heal, she wrote. You should try it. The words carried a gentle authority, like advice offered to a child. At dinner one night, hosted by a cousin who kept glancing at me as if I might combust again, my son raised his glass. Here's to fresh starts, he announced. A pause. Some people need a hard reset. Laughter rippled. I smiled thinly and kept my hands folded. The next day, my phone buzzed with a message from my son. Quick thing, the bank wants clarification on last week's filings. A minute later, another message from my daughter-in-law. Can you review the contractor agreement? There's a clause that looks scary. No greeting, no acknowledgement of the night before. The assumption slid into place like it always had. I replied once, I'm not available today. The typing bubble appeared, vanished, appeared again. This is time sensitive. My son pressed, you know how this stuff works. I knew. That was the problem. At a family brunch I didn't attend, someone posted a photo of a burnt marshmallow over a fire pit. The caption read, Too much heat ruins everything. My daughter-in-law liked it. My son commented with a flame. No one asked where I was staying or how I had slept. Concern had been replaced by commentary. My loss repackaged as content and cautionary tale. Each joke carved a little more space between us, turning familiarity into something sharp. That night, another request arrived. Just one favor, my son wrote. I stared at the screen, felt the anger settle low and steady, and let the message sit unanswered. Something had cracked. Not loudly, but enough to change the shape of everything that followed. I moved twice in 3 months. First, a spare room offered by a woman from church who barely knew me. It's quiet here, she told me, handing over a key. Take the back room. She didn't ask for explanations. She didn't offer advice. That alone felt like mercy. Later, I signed a lease for a small rental near the bus line. The manager glanced at my paperwork and nodded. You're steady, he remarked. That matters. I carried my boxes up alone, stopping halfway to breathe, my knees aching in a way they hadn't before. At 67, recovery comes slower. It adjusts. At the diner down the street, the waitress learned my name after 2 visits. Coffee, the usual, she asked, already pouring. I tipped more than I should have. She smiled like it meant something. My phone stayed quiet. No updates. No check-ins. The absence felt heavy at first, then oddly clean. Evenings settled into simple habits. Wash the mug, fold the blanket, write tomorrow's list. I slept early and woke before dawn, stiff but intact. One afternoon, the woman next door knocked, holding a misdelivered package. Thought this might be yours, she said. When I thanked her, she shrugged. We look out for each other here. I closed the door and leaned against it, letting the fatigue wash through me. The world hadn't ended when my family stepped back. It had narrowed, then steadied. Survival wasn't loud. It was quiet, repetitive, and possible without those who only watched. The anniversary found me without warning. 1 year to the day. My phone lit up with a notification I hadn't asked for. My son had posted a photo of himself and my daughter-in-law smiling into the sun, captioned with words about growth and hard truths. He wrote that karma has a way of correcting what people refuse to see. He added a flame emoji. Neat and deliberate. I stared at the screen longer than I meant to. My daughter-in-law joined the thread minutes later. Some lessons arrive when you stop ignoring patterns. She typed. Friends applauded the message, hearts stacked up. Someone called them brave. I sent my son a private message. Short and plain. That night still matters to me. I watched the read receipt appear. No reply came. An hour passed, then another. Silence answered louder than any argument. A cousin called to check in, her voice careful. They didn't mean it the way it sounds. She offered, "You know how people talk online?" I thanked her and ended the call, my hands steady, my chest hollow. By evening, the post had spread. Screenshots arrived from people who meant well and didn't realize they were reopening a wound. I closed each one and felt something settle into place. Not anger, not grief, certainty. I understood then that acknowledgement wasn't coming. There would be no apology, no moment where the story corrected itself. My loss had been repurposed into a moral lesson for their audience, and my place in their lives had already been edited out. I set my phone face down on the table and didn't pick it up again that night. The resolve that followed wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quiet, firm, and long overdue. I didn't announce anything. I just stopped. The first thing I did was return what never should have been mine to carry. I returned the folders to my son with concise notes. These are your records. You'll need this password. The deadline is next month. I kept the tone neutral, professional, the way I always had. When he replied, confusion crept through the words. "Why are you sending this now?" I waited before answering. "Because it belongs to you." My daughter-in-law noticed next. She called late, voice tight with irritation. The bank portal locked me out. "Can you fix it?" I told her I didn't have access anymore. The pause stretched. "Since when?" she pressed. "Since now." She laughed once. Sharp. "You're being dramatic." I let the silence sit. She hung up. I removed my name from shared accounts. I turned off reminders that had lived on my phone for years. No more alerts. No more silent interventions before problems became visible. Each step felt like pulling my hand away from something hot, slow and careful, afraid of getting burned again. The fear came in waves. What if they failed? What if they blamed me? Old habits whispered that stepping back was cruel, that a good mother absorbs inconvenience, that love means staying useful. Then a message arrived from my son. "This is a mess." He wrote, "I can't find half the things you used to handle." I read it twice and set the phone down. Control didn't feel like power. It felt like choosing not to rush in. By the end of the week, my hands stopped shaking when notifications buzzed. I cooked simple meals. I slept through the night. The world didn't collapse when I stepped aside. It shifted. And in that shift, I felt something unfamiliar settle in. Strength that didn't come from fixing anything. Strength that came from letting go. The first message came from my son, early and frantic. "Did you know there was a filing due this week?" He followed it with another line. "There's a penalty notice. They're charging late fees." I read it once and let it sit. A few minutes later, my daughter-in-law joined in. The bank flagged our account. Something about missing documents. Her tone sharpened. "You handled this before?" I answered only when the messages stacked high enough to blur together. "I'm not managing those things anymore." The response was immediate. You can't just stop. My son wrote, "This affects us." I typed back slowly, "It affects you. That's why it belongs to you." Deadlines passed and notices piled up, yet I stayed silent. Numbers climbed where calm used to be. My daughter-in-law called, voice tight, breath quick. "This is spiraling," she snapped. "You know exactly how to fix it." I told her I wasn't available. She accused me of punishing them. I listened without interrupting. When she finished, I ended the call. They tried another angle. Family helps family. My son texted later that night. "After everything we've done for you," I read that line twice. Everything they'd done for me. I didn't respond. A week later, he showed up at my door. His confidence had thinned. "I didn't realize how much you were handling," he admitted, eyes darting away. "We're drowning here." There it was. Recognition. Arriving late and unaccompanied by apology. I held the doorframe and kept my voice level. "I told you," I replied. "You didn't want to hear it." He stood there a moment longer, waiting for rescue that didn't come. When he left, the air felt lighter. Their world hadn't burned in flames. It burned in missed details, unpaid costs, and the sudden absence of the woman who'd kept everything running. I watched from a distance, not with satisfaction, but with a quiet understanding that stepping away had finally revealed the truth. My days settled into a shape that belonged to me. I woke early, made coffee, and paid my own bills without anyone else's name attached. The quiet no longer felt empty. It felt earned. When my son called weeks later, his voice carried a careful distance. "We hired someone," he mentioned, as if sharing neutral news. "Things are different." I told him I hoped it worked out. That was all. He didn't ask for help. I didn't offer it. My daughter-in-law sent a short message after that. "We're managing." The words read like a boundary of our own making. I respected it. We existed on separate sides of the truth now, and that was fine. I didn't wait for reconciliation or imagine apologies that would never arrive. That would never arrive. What I had was steadier than forgiveness. I had clarity. Their world had burned without me. Not because I touched a match, but because I stopped standing in the heat for them. Mine didn't need rebuilding anymore. It needed air. There's a lesson I carry forward. One I learned too late to save my house, but early enough to save myself. Love doesn't mean erasing yourself to keep others comfortable. Support isn't endless if it's never returned. Boundaries aren't punishment, they're maintenance. If this story resonated with you, take a moment to like the video, leave a comment, or subscribe. Someone else might need to hear that stepping away can be an act of care, not cruelty.